Hello, I'm Ricky.
And I'm Joe, and this is season 5, episode 7 of the Beer and Broadband podcast, slated to come out on M- May. I just had a moment there, almost said March. Had slated to come out on May 16th, 2022. And we are going to just like get right into it. We're full of like certificates and certificate talk, and this is going to be Ricky's show because I've been a little slacking in the certificate department. But first, let's talk about the beer that we're going to do. This is the Sycamore, which is Sycamore Brewing from Charlotte, North Carolina. Cinnamon Bun Latte. It's a blonde ale with coffee and cinnamon, 6.2% ABV. They don't really have a descriptor or anything like that. That's just kind of all that they say. I can tell you, when it came out, like into my glass, and I got to smell it. It definitely has like a sticky bun cinnamon kind of smell to it. I don't know what it tastes like because I haven't tasted it yet. So, what do you
Oh,
think,
man.
Ricky?
I'll tell you, this one tastes pretty good. I'm liking it. It's very light, almost like a little bit airy, but it's smooth. Just on like the beginning, right as soon as it hits your tongue, there's just a little bit of sweetness. There's definitely some of that like dark coffee flavors, but the aftertaste on it is so bright. I mean, it really does kind of feel like you took one of those like Pillsbury Doughboy, the real thick cinnamon rolls they make. They're not like donutty, they're like almost like cakey. And you dunked that in like a light coffee. Not sure I necessarily call it a latte because it didn't have like that necessary creaminess to it, but like a blonde roast,
Mm-hmm.
and just took a bite out of that. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I actually get a little bit of creaminess to it, but like I said, my beers are a little bit more warmed up. And so um there may be something to like a cellar temperature almost beer that to a like fresh out of the fridge beer that makes it have a little bit more of those flavors or that mouthfeel with the creaminess. But it it tastes like um a Cinnabon or a pill like you said, like one of those, which is, still in that like baked good sort of thing. It kind of reminds me of the flavor that I taste when they're cooking. You know what I'm saying? Like if
Yeah,
I'm
like that
getting some
scent in the air.
coffee and that scent's in the air, and then like I also kind of taste it and it
Hmm.
hits with that coffee, it reminds me of that. Like it's this is dangerous, and this I'm just gonna tell you, being a diabetic, this is dangerous for me. This is very
This is
dangerous.
pretty good. I think I could get my wife to drink this. I mean,
I
you
don't know. I
know,
don't think Venus would drink it, so I'm not sure that Alice would. I mean, they
I
both
don't know.
like kind of
Alice will drink some beer. If you can
okay,
get it in there with the right flavor profile, she'll buy 6 packs of stuff for herself.
okay.
Um, this is what I'll say about this one compared to, the other flavored one we just tried. I'm
Oh,
not sure I could have pinned the word latte, but I could have definitely given you cinnamon bun coffee off of the
yeah,
way this tastes.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I have a couple others of these, and I kind of want to do a blind taste test with like get some other like beers and like put them side by side, and let's just see if they like if we can pick that out. I think that we
Hmm.
would because it tastes so much like a cinnamon bun.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like the cinnamon here is so strong. Like not even in the spice of like when you have like cinnamon in your mouth, but just like
Right.
that essence is there.
It's definitely like a baked good
Hmm.
and some you know it it reminds me, I mean, again, I'm just going to say, I go to a coffee shop, I get some really good coffee, and then I have a cinnamon bun that's cooking, and I can kind of taste the the smell that I'm getting, out of that. It's awesome. Um, this is out of this round of beers that I bought. This is probably going to be in my top like beers because there'll be a couple more beers, that I buy for the podcast over the season. I'm wondering if this is going to be my number one. I mean, so far it is out of the two that we've tried, right? But
Hmm.
uh,
I mean, it's real good.
yeah,
I'll give them that one. This nailed it. Probably
so
finishing this one too.
I want to make this one. I want to make something like this. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to make something like this. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So let's talk about something that I know that's been near and dear to your heart for the past like 3 to 6 months. Getting certificates. How many certificates have you gotten in the last 4 or 5 months, Ricky?
Oh no, put me on the spot. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like 5 or 6.
Okay. And they're not all like these big um industry technology certificates. Some of them are like PM certificates or like,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
agile
Yeah,
certificates or something like that, right?
yeah. Agile certificates, and our company does some internal training programs. Some of those, I think only two I've gotten are like industry recognized. The other ones are really more, the smaller project management, little things like that. But yeah, it's been a rush. There's something almost addictive about the not the big theory certificates. We talk a lot about like the Cisco certifications and things
Hmm.
like that. They take all these months and months and months of like really hard study. And to switch from that to like, oh, okay, I'll take a 3-day course and then I'll study for a week. And then I have a certificate and management's all happy about it. At the rate at which you can bust those out, I'm like, that's a little addicting. Like
Yeah.
I did 2 in one day. And my managers were so amazed. It's like it really wasn't that big a deal. When you're used to studying for these huge industry ones, when you sit down to like a 40-hour company training with a small test at the end, like I took my ITIL and then just later that day on a whim was like, I'll take the internal one. Why not?
Yeah.
And knock
I'm
that one
knocking
out
those
too.
out. Yep.
Felt good.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot more. I haven't been doing it lately. I'm now that I'm kind of changing roles a little bit. I might be doing that a little bit more because you're about to be a lot more busy, and about to be a lot less busy. So I might fill my time with certificates. My heart is empty, so I need to fill it with something. Certificate seems like it fits that void. Um,
Look, the
but
way the way management feels about it. I think we talked about that before in the long, long time ago, talking about getting certs. Is that one of the big advantages of getting certs, even for things you know pretty well, is just the recognition for it.
yeah,
So yeah, absolutely.
but I
You see
mean
a low hanging fruit, grab it.
that kind of like flies into this next thing that I was going to talk about. The industry's changing when it comes to network engineers, and we've talked about this before. Like you're no
Mm.
longer a network engineer; you're like a NetSecDevChatOps engineer, developer, jack of all trades, Linux admin. They don't expect for you just to know one set of skills and be focused in one area. They expect for you to be broad in a lot of things and have like a depth of knowledge that's enough to be able to perform work in all of those things, but to be really deep in one subject, it seems now. And so I just want to get your perspective on that. What's the what's the way you see the industry going with that stuff?
In all honesty, I was thinking about this not too long ago. It almost seems like we've gone backwards in a way. Like not necessarily like backwards in progress, but like backwards in time. You know, my dad was an IT guy. He got his training in computer science, but then also did a lot of like smaller computer things. 'Cause that's kind of how it was. Like if you were a developer, you were kind of stuck into your language. But if you were doing like IT work, there were a lot grayer lines then. Like a company would hire an IT guy, like you're the computer guy. You should go do all the computer things. And then that didn't work super well. So specialties kind of started to form, and it wasn't just your university certified you for this, but now there were industry standards and there were certifications for things. And you were a Linux admin, or you were a Windows admin, or you were a network engineer. And to some extent, I think there was always a hope that people could hop the fence if they needed to. But people kind of stayed in their lanes more. And now, even at big companies, I feel like we're going back to, oh, hey, we can just call somebody an SRE and they're supposed to be able to do everything. They're just making new titles to feel like they don't need the specialties anymore. And so I don't know how that's going to look long term. There's a reason everything's split out. I think probably we're in for some very interesting years of hiring in the IT world.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'm even just now seeing a lot of hiring. Those are the companies we work for. Just talking with other people. Because, I still keep up with all of our old coworkers that we're not really with anymore.
Yep.
I know a couple of them are looking for jobs right now.
Yep.
And there's almost this emphasis on like, oh, okay, well, you only know some of it right now, but then you'll learn the rest. And I just don't think the average person has the capacity for that. Like, as soon as you tell someone that, they've got a limited amount of headspace, and right now it's dedicated to one particular thing, and they got to now fit in 3 or 4 more things in there. I mean, sure, they'll do their best to learn it. They're smart people. But I don't think it's going to work out the same way that like management thinks of it.
No.
That like the larger world thinks of IT, you'll get somebody that knows everything, but they won't know it as well as the person who's dedicated to something. Even to that end, like my network skills are not as good as they used to be. Now my troubleshooting skills are better because I have to constantly troubleshoot in different technologies for my job. But if you sat down and made me take some of the tests I took before and passed, I'm not sure I could. I certainly don't remember as much about route when I took it that I do now when I did that for my CCNP, because I haven't touched this stuff. But on paper, there's an outage, you better call me because I'm the guy that knows the network. Now, I also got to be the guy that knows the automation and knows all this other stuff. So, maybe that's it. Maybe what is it? Hesitant pessimism. I hope it turns out okay. I hope people kind of turn around before then. But I don't think long term you can expect everybody to know every discipline. Not at an advanced level.
No.
You can at a basic level. I mean, there's whole certifications just about a little bit about everything, so you can be like that L1 guy. But yeah, once you get into the real nitty gritty, there's only so much room people have. Like if you treat like another part in STEM, I know I'm dominating this conversation, but this last bit.
I completely made this for you to be able to talk just about the whole time about this topic.
Yeah, I guess because I come from a different STEM background, at least in my education. I didn't really do much comp sci compared to some other disciplines I studied. I was mostly physics and chemistry. That would be like saying, okay, master's degree level, because most of the people that I see in the industry getting brought in now for these kind of everything roles, they're generally really high performing bachelors or they're a master's degree candidate. And say, okay, you got your master's in chemistry. That's great. But we're also looking for someone who can perform at a master's level for biology and physics and environmental science, ideally. And like, is there some overlap there? Yeah. When I took chemistry, I'd already taken some biology. So, I'd also taken like biochem, which was done in the biology department. It's like, okay, yeah, I knew some of these concepts. I'd done a lot of physics stuff, so some of the things they talk about in some of my mathematics courses, yeah, I kind of knew that stuff because they overlap. But I'm not an expert in all of it. You can't take the master's degree chemistry guy and say, hey, but I also need you to be a master's degree physics person, and it's just expected. There's a reason those are different disciplines. They're related, but they're not the same. And I don't think the IT world is really taking that into consideration because I think there's just too much of this idea of smaller and smaller stuff. I think a couple podcast episodes ago, I can't remember if it was an individual conversation or podcast one, we talked about some of the issues with the economy and the kind of like just-in-time delivery. So like
that was a podcast topic.
Yeah. we're cutting down, trying to save pennies to the point that we're not stable anymore. And I feel like that's the same sort of mentality that brought this around. I don't need 4 people if I can get one person that can do 4 people's jobs. But the problem is one person's still one person. They don't got 4 brains.
Yep.
They can dip their toes in the water of what the other 4 people knew, but they can't replace all 4 people.
They can't be in 4 places at once.
Yeah, I mean that's the other angle of it, right? Like you're completely even ignoring the man hours that you've got 4 times as much work out of 4 people. Just the knowledge. Like, yeah, I don't think you can. I mean, for anything really, like put IT to the table. If you just grabbed 4 professionals and you brought them to me and said, Ricky, for the next year, your job is just to learn how to do every one of these other 4 people's jobs. I don't care what their jobs are. I probably can't do it. Unless I get real lucky and there's some significant overlap between them. You know, you bring me a construction worker and even just one other thing. I mean, even just a construction worker. I don't know if I could be an IT guy and do like real serious construction. Well, when you plop a police officer, a teacher, a nurse, and like a chef in front of me, I can't learn all 4 of those jobs. And I think people have that reaction. Everyone would agree it would be crazy to be the chef, nurse, whatever the other 2 I said were, all in one.
Well, so what if you were expected to be a police officer, an EMT, and a firefighter all at the same time?
Yeah, see, I don't think you could pull that off, but that would trick people into it.
There are many places that is they just call their branches that do that first responders, and they are the people that they hire to do those jobs are just that's just what they do. So
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. You beat me to my next point. I think because in people's minds, all these IT fields are related, just like all 3 of those emergency services are related, people feel like it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really that much easier than just picking 4 random professions. Just because they're related doesn't mean that you know those skill sets. I mean, we got a guy over in Voice. He's like one of their tier 3 guys. I think he's their lead that I work with all the time. If he ever gets a phone that's really stumping him, he comes and talks to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, he had this guy. He didn't know what was wrong. He didn't know the network. So I got on the network. I was like, oh, this guy's phone. I'll get an IP address. And he was really just boggled by this. And like I was talking to him, and he wasn't really getting what I was saying. And it dawned on me, it's like, oh, this guy probably just doesn't know how DHCP works.
Yeah, he has no idea.
And so like I sent him an infograph. Was like, this is the step it's breaking on. This is where it comes from. And then he kind of like understood it a bit better and was able to get the guy to do what I needed him to do. But even just that, like I'm a high-level network engineer. He's a high-level like voice engineer, and all his stuff has to run over the network. So like they're more closely related to each other than like network and Windows.
Yep.
And even then, a real basic network concept, how DHCP works, he didn't know because he doesn't need it for his job. So yeah, this idea that you're going to get the network engineer and the developer and the security guy and all that stuff. I mean, I'm not saying there's not people out there who can do it, but it isn't going to be standard. That's not going to be a job title that people excel at a large scale.
Definitely. I mean, I pretty much just let you talk about this because I think your perspective is particularly prescient in this.
But it doesn't.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it doesn't help that you put a good lineup of beers in front of me. Normally, I'm like half a cup of beer into 3 or 4 episodes. I'm like 2.5 beers into an episode now.
Well, you've had like 1 pint and 1 12-ounce, so yeah, you're probably a little bit further than that in. But
it's a good point. I didn't realize these were pints.
Yeah, the Sycamore is a pint.
So I'm about 2 pints in then, because I got halfway through the other one.
Okay. So the reason that I put this topic out here, and we may skip our 3rd topic just because we've talked about this for so long, but is because both of us are being expected to do this. Now, I have a breadth of skills that I've developed in my IT career, but I think my biggest set of like value adds are things like soft skills and stuff like that we really don't have like people talk about. But I was talking to one of our managers and she made it like a point of pride to say, I expect all of my engineers to know and be experts in multiple disciplines within technology. And look, I mean, you can learn multiple technologies. That's not a problem. There are people who know development. Like I know development, right? I'm not a developer, but I understand the different ways that development happens. The only language that I really understand at a deep level is Python. Um, but I understand those things, and I understand how they work. I think we could both agree on that, right?
Yep.
Um, but I am not a developer. I am a network engineer, um, and I'm not a general technologist. I'm a specialist in a particular level in network engineering. Now, I'm an architect level specialist in that particular area of networking, but I am not a generalist. I also, you could say, I have a lot of skills when it comes to Linux and Unix administration, right? I know
Mhm.
a good deal about that, right?
Yep.
Um, I know a good deal about other technologies like radius servers and authentication technologies and certificates, how to like manage certificate servers, reverse proxies, all these other things. Docker is another thing that I know a good deal about. Containerization. Um, and I've known about this stuff for a while. I've trained myself to understand these things. I know about software defined networking and software defined networking technologies. Um, but when it comes down to it, I am not an expert in any of those things. Some of those things I know a lot more about than others, but I'm not an expert in it. I build my own computers, but Linus Sebastian, expert in building computers. I'm not his level of expert, right?
Yep.
I well, I might be an expert in rebuilding iPods. That's probably one of the few things that I've like invested a lot of time in, done a bunch of times, like fixed over and over and over again. That's a technology thing that I've just like invested in, right? Um, but there's a certain level that I get to in these things, and there's someone else that's the expert. I'm just a person who knows enough about it to be good at it, right? And I think that's where we've both shot ourselves in the foot, and we've done like amazing because there are a lot of people like me out there. They understand a lot of these things. They're able to like go in these areas and be like, "Oh yeah, I understand this. Like I can get this." Talking about BGP, yeah, okay, sure. Let's talk about that. I'm not the guy that you want running your WAN infrastructure. That's not my particular
Mhm.
bailiwick. Um, I don't know that. And if you threw me in there to do that, I need someone else that's a higher level person that understands that to sit down and explain a bit to me for a while. It might take me 6 months to get up to a place to where I'm able to perform at that level that I'm used to performing at. But I could get there, right? Now I'm going to forget some of the other things that I knew, like you were talking about. I don't remember as much about networking as I used to know because I'm not doing it all the time, right?
Yeah.
That stuff would come back if I had to go back and do it, but I'm going to forget some stuff about VPN. Probably going to forget some stuff about running certificate servers. I got notes somewhere and I'll remember it if I read them, but you know, my brain can only like hold so much information before it poops it out, right? So,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you on this. I think part of the problem with the statement that you heard there is people really cheapen the word expert.
mm-hmm.
Like you throw it out there. People always say, the 10,000 hours deliberate practice makes you an expert at something, and people, go about what's the exact number for like certain things. But that's the general rule of thumb. I just did the math here. If you take an 8-hour workday and you say all 8 hours they're deliberately working on this thing, that would take 3.5 years. to become an expert
Mm-hmm.
in something.
That's
So I
right.
very highly doubt, because they would need to be an expert in one thing first to have multiple expertise. So I really don't think every person, every engineer under that, whoever told you that, has 7 years of dedicated experience. Not taking meetings during that day, just 8 hours a day. And that's not even work days. That's on the weekends too, I guess. They didn't
Yep.
separate that out. So just every single day, 8 hours to become that expert.
Doing nothing
What?
but sitting there working on that.
Mm-hmm. What
Yeah.
they probably mean is that every person on my team has at least 2 skills they can perform at a professional level. They're worth
Mm,
paying for it,
no,
because
that's not
that's a
what
much lower bar.
that is not what that manager means. That manager didn't really understand what they were saying, though. I'll
True.
give
So
them.
maybe the way I should say it is that's the more truthful statement. Whether they know what they mean,
No,
that's
what
how
they
it really is.
so I'm going to disagree with you there. What they actually meant is I have asked my engineers that perform at a certain grade level to learn about the other technologies in our area in our area that we manage. And so they know something about each of those technologies. They've taken trainings on them. That's what they meant.
Gotcha. Then
Yeah.
yeah, then it's just a completely false statement.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I really think you can buy in to the idea that people can perform at a professional level more than one thing. Like, so to your point, you are a network engineer, really just, network architect that has some development skills. I'm
Hmm.
really the flip side to that, at least in our current role. I've got
Yep.
a lot of experience doing other types of support. I still think I probably know more about Windows than I do about networking. I spent so much of my life living in that ethos. But I wouldn't call myself an expert developer. I'm a professional developer, absolutely. I can perform at a very high level. Same thing as a network engineer. I can perform at a high level. I can beat that guy you're paying 18, $20 an hour to work on a network. But I'm not an expert in either one of those things. Hell, I'm not sure I am a true expert in barely anything because of how much, like, just direct dedication that takes. The idea is like an expert, they have to really go and seek knowledge. They're not going to run across, oh, here's this tidbit I didn't know. They've absorbed pretty much all that can be easily attained, and they've got all this hands-on practice with everything. You know,
So I
it,
disagree with you on that. I think that you are an expert in some areas. You are not, I would say you're a professional level developer across the board, but when it comes to your particular bailiwick, just like I'm a professional level network engineer, but when it comes to my particular thing that I know about, I am an architect. Like, they don't go to other people to ask them how to run a hardware VPN network. They go to me because I am probably one of the few people in this world that know at such a deep level how to run that and all the caveats that happen with it at scale. For you, it's the same thing. How do you automate a hardware VPN network? You're a developer who knows how to do that. And that is a particular set of skills that, you're that high level there. It's
yeah,
just
that's
because
true,
it's
but
just
that's
that focus thing that's where your expertise is in that very limited range.
yeah, but I think that's the problem with the word expertise, right? Because then you're starting to argue from two different directions. It's the how much experience do you have in terms of how many hours have you spent mastering this craft versus what percentage of the population can do this task. And granted, both of those can be accurate measures depending on how you want to do it. So maybe I'll give you that. In terms of the number of people that know how to do my job, it's a very specialized job. There's not many
Right.
compared to I haven't spent 3.5 years, 8 hours a day doing, hardware VPN automation. So by that definition, I wouldn't be an expert, but that's probably splitting hairs. But I
That
think
is
it's,
probably splitting hairs because I actually think you've spent pretty close to that.
oh, I
Do
don't know.
you like, well, okay, well, think about when you started doing this. How many years has it been? The whole
Yeah, I
time
mean,
we've
I
been doing
get
this
it.
podcast,
It's been a long
it's
number of
been
years, but
we've
I
been doing
spend a
this
lot of my
podcast.
days in meetings, not writing code.
Okay, but we've been doing this podcast for almost 6 years, and you've been doing it more than we've been doing this podcast. Is That's just my point.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the 10,000 hour rule, I'm definitely past 5,000 hours.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm at 10,000 yet. But
Okay.
I do think it runs down to your point though, that same thing with people trying to split out. Everyone knows everything. They don't really
Mm-mm.
understand the nuances of that, and they think
Yeah.
they can take somebody who's really smart and say, "Look, I had them do shadowing for 3 months. They're an expert now."
Yep.
Maybe back on that topic, if I don't remember if it was a podcast topic or not. One of the companies I did a long contract with, they had a CEO. It was a smaller company. It was only about 20, 30 people. And he was a smart guy. He was a lawyer who then got into other areas of law. And he was notorious for, when a position kind of wasn't needed anymore, or he just really liked the person that was in a lower position. It's like, oh, hey, you are just this brilliant salesperson. You're so great at selling accounts and you're so smart. And I think you could be more valuable as this manager over the graphics design department. And he would just do that. He just moved
Yep.
people. And it
Just
was in
move
his
people over there.
idea, because they're smart, they'll pick it up. And I never got to witness it because I wasn't there that long, but I heard from like other employees that like those people ended up getting let go
Yeah.
because just because you're smart doesn't mean you can just suddenly turn on a dime and start a whole new profession.
As one of our friends says, in order to like be successful, you have to be empowered, have the ability, and have the backing to be able to do the job that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
If there are responsibility, and if you don't have the responsibility and the empowerment, or you don't have the backing and the empowerment, or all those other things, it's going to fail, right?
Yep.
So that's what always happens with those things. Is someone's just like, well, you're smart, you can figure it out, and they just throw you in it, and then you fail. And only people that recognize that generally succeed in those moments. They find ways to be crafty and get around the failure that's happened to them, but they're not really becoming experts. They're just surviving in a world where you put them in a tough situation. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So we talked through this. Do you have anything else that you want to say about DevSec, NetOps, Chat Ops, or getting a bunch of certificates or anything like that?
No, all I'll say is having 2 pints of beer in you makes it easier to talk about.
I can see that. All right. Well, this has been Beer and Broadband, Season 5, Episode 7. And we have a Twitter and a Patreon. We'd love to see you there. Engage with us. Tell us some topics that we want to hear from you. But otherwise, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.